الحمد لله استهل بالحمد خير ما نزل إليك خمسا تبدأ.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Honorable and respected listeners, today we discuss the 15 juz of the Quran Sharif. It entails the entire Surah Bani Israel, also known as Surah Isra, and then a portion of Surah Al-Kahf. The very beginning of the surah, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala speaks about the Isra of our Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the first portion or the first part of the Mi'raj of Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah Ta'ala speaks about it saying, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawlahu linuriyahu min ayatina. Glory be to that being, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, who took his abd, his slave, Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in a very short, small portion of the night from Masjidul Haram, that is in Makkah Mukarramah, ila al-Masjid al-Aqsa, to Masjidul Aqsa or to Baytul Muqaddas, alladhi barakna hawlahu, that Baytul Muqaddas which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had blessed its surroundings with, one, spiritual blessings, the home of many Anbiya alayhimus salatu wassalam, then also many material blessings that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had made this land lush, linuriyahu min ayatina, so that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala could show our Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam some of the signs of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala also speaks about the Bani Israel, that the Bani Israel had from time to time become disobedient to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's azab had come upon them, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had made the enemies overcome them. Sayyidina Hudhayfa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, in a narration narrated by Imam Qurtubi rahimahumullah, says that he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the status of Baytul Maqdis or Baytul Muqaddas or Masjidul Aqsa. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded that it is one of the distinct homes of ibadah, of worship in the world, and it is a great house which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had made for many, amongst them Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam and Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam. It was made with gold and silver and precious stones like rubies and emeralds. The manner in which this happened, when Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam had begun the construction, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala had made the jinn subservient to him. The jinn collected this gold and silver and precious stones and used them in the making of and the building of this masjid. Sayyidina Hudhayfa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu says that he then asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as to where and how did all that gold and silver and precious stones go out of Baytul Muqaddis. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, when the Bani Israel disobeyed Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, when they began to sin, committed ill deeds, killed the Anbiya alayhimus salatu wassalam, then Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala set a king Bukht Nasr upon them. Now it wasn't as though Bukht Nasr was an obedient slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a fire worshipper. And then he overcame the Bani Israel and he ruled Baytul Maqdis for 700 years. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala said in the Quran, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ أُولَاهُمَا بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ عِبَادًا لَنَا أُولِي بَأْسٍ شَدِيدٍ. So when the appointed time had come for the first of the two conquest of the enemy over Masjidul Aqsa, we sent upon you some servants having strong and aggressive power. The army of Bukht Nasr entered the masjid, killed the men, took the women and children as prisoners, and carried away with them the gold, the silver, and everything of value belonging to Baytul Maqdis. It was loaded on 170,000 carts. He kept the treasure in his country, Babylon, and also he enslaved and imprisoned the Bani Israel for a period of 100 years, making them do hard labor in absolute disgrace. Then Allah wa ta'ala made a king from amongst the people of Persia to stand up against him when the Bani Israel had become obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He conquered Babylon. He freed whoever was left from the Bani Israel in the bondage of Bukht Nasr, and he made arrangements to have all the valuables brought back to Baytul Maqdis and returned to it. Then he told the Bani Israel, should they in future return to the disobedience of Allah, he too will return the punishment of the killing and imprisonment on the Bani Israel. Later, when the Bani Israel had come back to Masjid al-Aqsa, they went back to the life of sin and misdeeds. At that time, Allah wa ta'ala set the Roman Emperor Caesar upon them. And this is what Allah wa ta'ala speaks about in the ayat, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ لِيَسُوءُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. The Roman Emperor launched an attack upon them from the land and the sea. He killed many and he took many as prisoners. And then again, all this wealth was taken from Baytul Maqdis, and again 170,000 carts were used to remove and take it away from there. And in this way, Allah wa ta'ala gives a very simple message, not only to the Banu Israel, but to each and every reciter of the Quran, that when we become disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah wa ta'ala will then take away sovereignty from us, and Allah ta'ala will create difficulties in our lives. Thereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, and Allah ta'ala gives us several commandments. Many of this has been spoken about in Surah Al-An'am, but here over and above that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about obedience to one's parents. Allah wa ta'ala also speaks about another very important aspect, وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا, that do not walk on the earth in pride and vanity. إِنَّكَ لَن تَخْرِقَ الْأَرْضِ وَلَن تَبْلُغَ الْجِبَالَ طُولًا. For certainly you will not be able to take and to crush and crumble this world, and nor would you reach the mountains in height. Allah wa ta'ala then speaks about the different aspects with regards to the Quraysh of Makkah, and towards the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Allah Rabbul Izzat granting Musa alayhi salatu wassalam several signs, tis'a ayat, 9 signs, and Allah wa ta'ala then concludes the surah saying and commanding, قُلِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي لَمْ يَتَّخِذْ وَلَدًا وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ فِي الْمُلْكِ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلِيٌّ مِّنَ الذُّلِّ وَكَبِّرْهُ تَكْبِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about His greatness, that all praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has not begotten a son, and Allah wa ta'ala does not have any partner in the sovereignty of Allah wa ta'ala in the arrangements of this world. And then nor is anyone needed to protect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have any weakness. وَكَبِّرْهُ تَكْبِيرًا. Then proclaim the greatness of Allah Rabbul Izzat. Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the Ashab-e-Kahf, that those young people that had to leave the community for the protection of their iman. And this is a very, very great lesson for us, that sometimes we have to make sacrifices to protect our iman. And the best way, obviously, for us is to create the environment of iman wherever we be, in our homes, in our businesses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about two men. وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الرَّجُلَيْنِ, give them the example of two men. Both of them, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala had granted certain degree of intelligence, but one of them, Allah Ta'ala had granted two gardens of different types of fruit, and obviously he was not going to believe and bring iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Sayyidina Musa wa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wassalam going on the journey with Lifatah, with his young companion Sayyidina Yusha bin Nun alayhi salatu wassalam, and the meeting that had taken place with Khadir, which is famously known as Khidr, and obviously the incidents that had taken place at the time when Musa alayhi salatu wassalam was with Khidr, that they had embarked on this boat or the vessel, and he damaged the vessel. And the second in this juz, that he saw a young boy and he killed that young boy. And this was very strange to Sayyidina Musa wa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salatu wassalam. And Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala shows us very clearly in Surah Al-Kahf that there is a distinction between Iman and Kufr. There is a distinction between becoming a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worshipping Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, and its direct contrast, leaving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and getting involved and indulging in materialism. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
بالحمد حين تقرأ بالحمد حين تقرأ